Production funding for Behind the Headlines is made possible in part by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Business impact of the coronavirus shutdown tonight on Behind the Headlines. I'm Eric Barnes with the Daily Memphian, continuing to do Behind the Headlines remotely. And I am pleased to be joined today by two commercial real estate professionals who have broad experience across the Memphis economy. We'll start with Daryl Cobbins. He is principal, broker, and president of Universal Commercial. Thanks for joining us, Daryl.
Thank you.
And also Kemp Conrad, principal with Cushman Wakefield Commercial Advisors and a former member of the City Council. Kemp, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for having me today, Eric.
Again, I wanted to talk to both of you all, not just to talk about the real estate business, which obviously has been impacted, but also because your business has touched so many different types of companies, whether it's offices or it's retail, it's apartments. I think you all can talk to some degree on all that, as well as construction and finance and everything that goes into the commercial real estate business. And I'll start with you, Kemp. How bad is it out there?
Well, I think it really does depend on the various sectors and what kind of commercial practitioner you are. Obviously, retail is very, very difficult right now. Obviously, for the retailers that are struggling, and many of them who've had to close their businesses. And then for the landlords who are having to give rent concessions and these kinds of things. Office is struggling. I think will continue to struggle. But I think one of the bright spots is industrial. And, Memphis is a very big industrial logistics market. And we can talk more about it later, but I do think that will be one of the bright spots out of this, because what we've seen is really this revolution of retail shifting to e-commerce and more logistics. For every $1 billion in retail sales, companies need about 1.5 million to 2 million square feet of logistics space to support that. And so that's one of the things that's really been growing the logistics economy. And that trend will only continue now after this pandemic.
Let me bring a bunch of questions on that. But Daryl, just same for you. I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the hardest hit sort of sectors and those, distribution obviously is going to thrive right now. But how bad is it on the bad side for some of the folks you're dealing with?
Well, I think, I don't think we've seen the worst. I think right now, what is occurring is a lot of decision makers are pressing the pause button and trying to determine exactly how the federal policies that are coming down that are trying to help small businesses, help people in terms of unemployment, and ultimately stimulate the economy in the short term. I think they're watching that very closely and trying to determine what the long-term prognosis looks like so that they can ultimately make decisions in the best interest of their companies and employees. So I really think that we'll know probably within the next 3 months or so what that picture really looks like.
I mean, you mentioned the federal programs, the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP loans that the SBA, the federal government did. They are primarily focused on payroll and keeping people employed, but 25% of whatever amount a business gets, and full disclosure, Daily Memphian got a PPP loan, can go towards rent. Are you seeing that? I mean, there's been a lot of talk. Would people stop paying rent on April 1st? I guess I'll stay with Daryl for a second. I mean, have you seen people not paying rent? And do you think PPP is helping on that front?
Well, I think what's happening now is tenants are looking to inform their landlords of their particular situation, whether that's their inability to pay rent or their need to have rent abated for some period of time that allows for the stimulus dollars to come, or for the the policies that are meant to stimulate the economy, the opening back up and these types of things, to see if that will ultimately impact their businesses in a positive way. So I think right now what you're seeing is cordial and cooperative conversations happening between landlords and tenants, as opposed to tenants just stopping to pay rent. There may be a way to abate rent for a few months and then tack that onto the back end. But I think right now it's a cooperative conversation.
Uh, Kemp, same question. I mean, are you seeing and hearing of a lot of rent not being paid, is it a more cordial negotiation at this point?
I think Daryl hit the nail on the head there. I think that we're definitely seeing the request for rent abatement, and I think it's in everybody's best interest to cooperate and work together. It doesn't do an investor or an owner of real estate any good if their tenant goes bankrupt because they can't pay rent. And so it's really in everybody's best interest to cooperate. Typically what we are seeing is landlords are, wanting to dig into the financials or just wanting to make sure someone's not being opportunistic. But in most cases, we are seeing these issues get worked out in a win-win scenario, and hopefully that will continue.
We are in the midst, Shelby County, Memphis, the area is in the midst of reopening. We're 4 or 5 days into the phase one reopening of restaurants, offices with lots of conditions. Are you all seeing, let's just go with offices and I'll stay with Kemp for a second. Are you seeing people going back into their offices in any large numbers?
It's been really, really slow. And I can tell you, on behalf of our firm, we're working really hard during the month of May to put together a plan so that on June 1st, if everything goes as planned, is when people will really be allowed back into our office. We're putting a lot of measures in place, kind of implementing what we call at Cushman & Wakefield, the 6-foot office, one-way travel distances, taking chairs out of conference room. There's a lot of detail you really have to get into in order to do this correctly. Maybe staging when people come in and whatnot. So we're being very, very conservative. And most of what I'm hearing is a lot of companies are also being very conservative in that regard too, because if someone does get sick, then everybody's, you're back out for 14 days. So most people are being conservative is what we're seeing.
And we talked about the distribution, that didn't really, did the opposite, really ramped up through this whole period. To whatever degree you've seen, have they been safe? Have they been as distant as possible in the warehouses, industrial, and masks and so on? What's your sense of how that's been handled?
So yeah, no, I think all the companies, everybody's kind of learning on the fly, but there's a lot of great material out there from, attorneys and real estate firms and consulting firms. I think everybody's kind of learning on the fly. And, in some logistics centers, it's easier to spread out than others. But, I think that all these companies are trying to be as careful as they can. And, I just really want to, thank all the policymakers, first responders, and all the healthcare professionals and the folks that are working in logistics centers, the folks that are working at the grocery stores that are, really risking their own health to make sure that all of us citizens, get food and everything. It's, I'm just really thankful for that. And because it's, I'm sure it's not easy.
I'll stay with you. Again, you're former, 10 years on the city council, give or take, 8 to 10 years, something like that.
11. Yeah.
11. Yeah. Okay. Cause you were before the terminals. That's right. Do you think the city is opening, the city and county, is it time to phase in a reopening? Are they early? Are they late?
I think they've done it right. I think, elections matter, and I'm just thankful for the folks that we have in office that are running a data-driven approach. I think the collaboration with the city, the county, the municipal mayors, the other counties, for the most part, it's been really, really good. And you can't stay closed down forever. It's going to be really hard, but it's in our hands now, and I think people have to take these things seriously, the social distancing, but also, just wearing a mask now. I commend, Jeff Warren for really getting the conversation going about the importance of wearing these masks out in public when we're around other people. And, my mask protects you, your mask protects me. It's really an act of service. You don't wear a mask to protect yourself, a cotton homemade mask. You do it to protect somebody else. And the science out on this now is really, really impactful. And so it's going to be up to us now on how we go back and get back to work, because people cannot stay closed forever. There are a lot of businesses, even with PPP, they're on the verge of going out of business. People that have poured their heart and soul into it. The government's borrowed $3 trillion, you know, and you just can't keep doing that either. But it's in our hands now. We can do this as a community. But I think they've been really smart, and I think that's why our numbers, as of today's filming, they're looking good. They're looking better. We just got to keep it up, and I believe Memphians can do that.
Yeah, Daryl, similar question to you. Does it, you're not just a commercial real estate and involved with, you know, development and so on, but you're tremendously involved civically, a lot of different organizations that you work with. Is your sense that we're going too fast or too slow in the reopening?
Well, I think the pace that we're going about it is appropriate, sort of a tip your toe in the water sort of approach with an eye on data on a daily basis. I was happy to see that we're now expanding testing to certain communities that we know are disproportionately being affected, mostly those low-income communities, African-American communities, that when you look at the data shows that they are overwhelmingly being impacted by the virus. In addition to that, they're being affected economically, and that you know, our expansion of testing, I think, helps us get a more firm hand on our situation. And to quote Dr. Anthony Fauci, the best way to get control of the economy is to get control of the virus. And I think we're on our way to doing that with a whole lot more work to do.
Yeah, I've done 2 podcast interviews. They're on the Daily Memphian site. With Chantel Leatherwood from Christ Community, which has done just, you know, tremendous work with people who can't afford, you know, a doctor visit, who are in underserved areas. They've started doing testing of asymptomatic people. And Scott Morris from Church Health also was on that podcast talking about it. And it's really just amazing work. And I don't normally sort of drop my objectivity, but it's been pretty amazing. And you can really feel the pain that Chantel Leatherwood feels about this opening and how it's impacting African-American communities, but also the need to get back. And so it's pretty remarkable. In terms of those, you know, we're talking about testing and masks, and I'll stay with you, Daryl. I mean, it's going to be, you know, the notion of reopening is we don't go back to normal, right? I mean, Kemp articulated all the kind of office considerations they are having to do, and I'm sure tenants of theirs have to do, or people they work with. We're doing it at the Daily Memphian. We're taking May to kind of work through how we'll have a setup plan. Do you foresee, I mean, are there going to be thermometers at you know, restaurants and office buildings, masks? I mean, what happens in the workplace, Daryl, as you see it?
Well, I think you'll see a lot of the precautions that have been recommended by the CDC and by the medical experts, whether that's social distancing, masks, thermometer and temperature checking, intervals in terms of allowing people to come in at certain times and in certain waves as opposed to en masse. And so the way I've referred to this period that we find ourselves in is really this is the new normal for the foreseeable future. I think we have a long road ahead of us when you think about the fact that, you know, a vaccine may be 18 months at best on the way. And so it requires us to really be overly cautious to make sure that that we contain the virus as best we can and don't spread it, and that contact tracing and all those mechanisms are allowed to proliferate so that we can get it under control.
I've been surprised. Well, construction. Both of you are one way or another involved with construction projects you later represent in whatever way. Projects like the Universal Life Building, I think that you led, Daryl, downtown. Construction never stopped. It was deemed an essential business. But will new construction start? You know, I mean, it makes sense. I've heard people say it makes sense for a bank to continue to fund the construction of something because they don't want a half-finished building just sitting there, rain and exposed. But what's your sense of new groundbreaking from, I mean, so many announcements before all this, Union Row and the Snuff District and the Lowe's Hotel. And you can talk about specific projects or generally, will those sorts of projects begin, Daryl?
Well, I think they'll begin, and I think those that have been announced will have to continue. A number of those are so far down the road, it's a little bit hard to turn back now. But I think that they are monitoring all of the different macro and microeconomic factors. I think that there are projects that are happening in Midtown, downtown that are required to monitor supply and demand factors. So if you're a mixed use project, which many of them are, you're having to monitor, hotels, you're having to monitor retail, office, and consumer spending, which is a big driver in all of this. And so those factors, I think, determine at what pace and in what manner of velocity they propel their projects. But I don't think that they'll be stopping. I think they have to continue forward.
Your sense, Kemp, of what some of these big projects that haven't started, will they all continue or continue and scale down? In a scaled down way? I mean, it's a huge economic hit. We're talking about people are talking about 15 to 20% unemployment. How can you go forward with $1 billion+ project, let alone $100 million?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is going to depend on how fast the economy snaps back and do people have money to spend. I think it's going to depend on the asset class. I think, again, industrial, there's a lot of industrial demand, probably not going to be as much office demand as I think people have gotten used now to working at home and using technology, and companies aren't going to want to spend more in this time on probably more office space. Obviously, retail is going to be a lot different, but it's also an opportunity. Maybe the Lowe's Hotel can be one of the first convention center hotels with some redesigned features for the new normal, as Daryl said. I agree. We're never going to go back to how it was. I mean, it will always be different from this point forward. There's still, can you even really get immunity from this? If so, how long? What if the virus mutates? What about the next one? I mean, this is going to be a way of life now, for a long time. But that's also an opportunity for an innovative, entrepreneurial, creative city like Memphis. And so I'm hopeful that some of these projects like the Lowe's, like our new convention center that we're building right now, you can't do conventions like you used to do. They're going to have to be different. We have the opportunity now, though, to be an entrepreneurial city and to make some of these changes so that these projects can go forward and be a model for the country and maybe even the world.
Just even staying focused on office space for a second. I mean, it's been the trend over the last, 5-10 years of open floor plans, and getting away from the high walled cubicles and the separate offices for the managers. And, everything's much more shared spaces. That, I'm sure, Kemp, you've seen that and been part of. Is that going to get turned back around and we're all going to be in glass cubes?
I think what you'll see, I know that plexiglass sales are off the chart right now. So I think you're going to see, probably some workstations being removed. So they're none within 6 feet of each other. I think you're going to see plexiglass between workstations. But I don't think you're going to see a move back to offices or, again, companies taking more space. I think what you're going to see is more people working from home, more people working remotely. Some people working Monday, Wednesday, Friday in the office, some in Tuesday, Thursday. The fact of the matter is you just don't need the space. And we've really seen a compression over the last 10 years of that trend even before this happened. And right now, with all these companies now going through this economic challenge, typically for any kind of services business on your income statement, your occupancy expense is one of your top couple of expense items. They're not going to pay more for more space when now they've got to just survive. So I think I don't think you're going to see a move back to that. You'll just see changes, and those changes will continue for the long term. I think it'll be a trend, not just a headline, but a trend line.
And one additional factor I would add on to what Kemp has said is the sort of furlough and unemployment situation. As we go forward, we don't know necessarily the decisions that companies will make, but those that choose to contract and have a lower head count will ultimately require less space, which, to Kemp's point, drives down demand. So those are things that we'll have to monitor and really watch closely as we go forward.
What about one thing that's happened? I'll stay with Daryl. That there've been tremendous amount of apartment construction in Midtown and downtown over the last 3-4 years, some changes, some incentives, and suddenly just every project I think I mentioned, part of the anchor of them are apartments. You see changes there, Daryl? I don't know how close you are to the multifamily apartment industry, but do people get nervous? I mean, living in an apartment, they're a little closer than they are in a house, or does that not factor into things?
I'm not heavily engaged with apartments, but just intuitively, I think those separately domiciled spaces provide some degree of separation. I think the big challenge will be in those common areas that people are used to in those residential dwellings, whether that's the entry spaces, the laundry rooms, the workout rooms, the mail room, the patios and congregating spaces. I think those may get a closer look and probably go through some redesign and reconfiguration, just in lieu of all the things that we know right now about the virus and how it spreads and how we need to distance ourselves.
Kemp, same question. Apartments, a huge part of remaking downtown. I mean, the Carlisle project right now at One Beale is, still underway, and there are a massive number of apartments going in all over downtown because that construction hasn't stopped. But there's two things. There's going to be wariness, maybe, as Daryl described, of people who don't want to live in an apartment, and also just the demand for those apartments is unknown given the recession we're already in or going into.
Yeah, my sense is that multifamily is going to be okay. I mean, I think our occupancy rates downtown are in the high 90%. I mean, they fast as they build them, they get leased. Maybe there's some redesign, but again, just like folks that are like you're going to do in your office, mine, Daryl's, and everywhere, there's protocols you can put into place, and I don't think it's going to drive people away from wanting to live in apartments. There'll just be new protocols put into place on how you use the elevators, all those common amenities. And again, we're just simply wearing a mask and keeping that distance does so much. And so just being smart around those kind of things. But I'm very bullish on the multifamily development. I think that's really the key to growth and really attracting our next generation workforce is to have modern housing, and really glad to see it going up. I think that will continue.
Let's stay with.
I think one of the
go ahead, Kemp.
One of the biggest challenges in any asset class right now is just the debt markets. No one knows how to price risk right now. The CMBS debt markets are really kind of frozen. So
describe that. Slow that down just for a second, because it is really fascinating, and people, you're obviously much closer. The debt markets, and you said the commercial mortgage
backed securities, right? Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just there's obviously different kind of financing for projects. You have bank financing. You've got life insurance companies. You have CMBS debt, which is what finances a lot of bigger projects. And just right now, that's all based on how do you price risk of any development, and no one knows how to price risk right now. And so because you can't price risk about that next multifamily development or hotel, what's going to happen? That right now, so anything that's not already like through a construction phase. If you have an industrial building, you've got your pad built, but you haven't gone vertical on your slab and your walls. A lot of people are kind of just waiting to see what's going to happen. And a lot of that's just because you can't really get financing. So I think once, hopefully, we start getting control of this, the numbers start getting better, we know how to price risk, you'll see the debt markets free up, and then projects will start going forward again.
Your sense, Daryl, on that financing, that underpins all this work, this future work?
Yeah, I would agree with Kemp. I think if we look back to the 2008 period when we met similar but not as drastic economic circumstances, with regard to lending, what you saw was, to Kemp's point, a risk mitigation factor by a lot of lenders, where they were ultimately requiring 100% collateralization, meaning you had to not need the money to get the money in a lot of instances. And so I think the jury's still out in terms of how aggressive lenders will be in terms of managing risk in the short term. But again, I think those are all things that developers and investors are monitoring just to see what the macroeconomic forces dictate.
With just a minute and a half left, retail. I don't know which of you wants to take that, but have we seen? Will a new mall ever be built in this country? Malls were already in huge trouble. Big box retailers were in trouble. You've got J. Crew and Neiman both filed for bankruptcy in the last week. Sears, JCPenney are in huge trouble. I don't know. Kemp, you want to take that? I mean, I can't imagine the future of malls is bright at all. It was already dark before this.
Yeah, I don't know when the last mall was built in the U.S., but it was probably a long time ago. In fact, a lot of malls right now across the country are being repurposed into modern logistics centers for, same day, e-commerce delivery. So again, that's really really symbolizes what's going on with these shifts and how people shop and buy things. When you have old malls that are now being repurposed into logistics centers to deliver things to people's houses. So retail is going to be a tough one, I think. It was already under pressure, and this is just going to accelerate that. It's going to accelerate that trend.
Daryl, last word to you.
Yeah, piggyback on that. I think, again, as we talked about this new normal and how it impacts real estate, one of the big retail dynamics that I think that we have to pay attention to is how do we congregate as people over the next 3 to 5 years, and congregating in mass, which is what you see in shopping situations, dining situations, entertainment, whether that's sports. I think all of those things are going through seismic shifts where, if you were to build a shopping center today, you'd have to be thinking about all of those considerations going forward.
All right. Thank you both for being here. That is all the time I have. Yeah. Yes.
Daryl and I just wish all the moms a happy Mother's Day out there. They're really the ones that keep the world spinning. So happy Mother's Day to all.
Love you, Mama.
Then that is the last word. Thank you all for joining us. Join us again next week. Past episodes are on the WKNO site, or you can download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts.